In the golden glow of a 1920s English manor, a bride vanishes from her own wedding, her laughter silenced in a locked room where death awaits. Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp mind, unravels a web of jealousy, secrets, and betrayal. A spilled champagne glass, a bruised rose, a hidden key, and a note signed with a mysterious V. Each clue points to a killer among the guests. Was it the heartbroken groom, the envious friend, or the shadowy cousin with a past? As shadows deepen in Ashburn Manor, Poirot races to uncover a truth as deadly as the poison that claimed her. Will you follow the little gray cells to solve the mystery of the vanished bride? Chapter 1. The joyous occasion. The golden light of a June afternoon bathed Ashburn Manor in a glow that seemed to promise eternal summer. The estate, nestled in the rolling hills of Kent, stood resplendent, with its ancient stone walls draped in ivy, its mullioned windows catching the sun's rays like so many glittering jewels. The air was fragrant with roses and freshly cut grass, and the hum of conversation mingled with the delicate clink of champagne flutes. It was the wedding day of Miss Eleanor Winthrop to Mr. Charles Haverford, a union that had set the county abuzz with anticipation. The lawn, meticulously manicured, was a sea of pastel hats and tailored suits, as guests moved in graceful eddies beneath arches woven with white lilies and forget-me-nots. Hercule Poirot, impeccably attired in a dove-gray suit with a carnation pinned to his lapel, stood slightly apart, his small, precise figure a study in quiet observation, his sharp, gray eyes, framed by the curve of his iconic mustache, missed nothing: the flutter of a nervous hand, the too-quick smile, the glance held a moment too long. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the picture of English geniality, sipped his champagne and surveyed the scene with unreserved delight. What a splendid affair! Poirot, Hastings remarked, gesturing toward the laughing crowd. The bride's family has outdone themselves. Look at those floral arrangements, fit for royalty. Poirot inclined his head, his expression one of polite detachment. Oui, mon ami, it is a spectacle of great charm. The symmetry, the order, it pleases the eye. Yet there is something, a note out of tune, n'est-ce pas? In such gatherings, one finds not only joy but the undercurrents of the human heart. Hastings chuckled, his ruddy face creasing with amusement. You're incorrigible, Poirot, always sniffing out mysteries where there's only merriment. It's a wedding, man. What could possibly go wrong on a day like this? Poirot's lips twitched in the faintest of smiles, but he said nothing, his gaze drifting to the bride's party emerging from the manor's grand entrance. Eleanor Winthrop, radiant in a gown of ivory silk that shimmered like moonlight, moved with a grace that drew every eye. Her veil, a delicate cascade of lace, framed a face alight with joy, her auburn curls catching the sunlight. At her side, Charles Haverford, tall and handsome in his mourning suit, beamed with proprietary pride. The couple paused to greet guests, their laughter ringing out like a bell across the lawn. Poirot noted the way Charles's hand lingered on Eleanor's arm, possessive yet tender, and the way her eyes sought his in return. A perfect picture, he thought, yet his intuition, those little gray cells he so often invoked, stirred uneasily. He turned his attention to the other figures in the tableau. Miss Lydia Crane, the maid of honor, whose auburn hair mirrored Eleanor, but whose smile seemed to falter when Charles spoke, and a lean, dark-haired man standing alone near the marquee, his eyes fixed on the bride with an intensity that bordered on the improper. This, Poirot learned from a passing guest, was Mr. Victor Marshall, a distant cousin of the Winthrops, whose unexpected arrival had caused a minor stir. The ceremony had been flawless, conducted in the manor's ancient chapel, where the vicar's voice had carried a warmth that softened even the sternest hearts. Now, as the guests awaited the couple's first toast as husband and wife, the atmosphere was one of buoyant expectation. A string quartet played softly, and footmen circulated, with trays of canapes and crystal flutes. Poirot accepted a glass, though he sipped sparingly, preferring to keep his faculties sharp. "Tell me, Hastings," he said, his voice low, "what do you make of Mademoiselle Crane? Her demeanor, it is not entirely that of a devoted friend." "Nan." Hastings followed Poirot's gaze to where Lydia stood, adjusting her lavender sash with quick, nervous movements. "Oh, she's just anxious for Eleanor. I expect weddings are emotional affairs, especially for old friends. They grew up together, you know." "Precisement," Poirot murmured. "And in such closeness, there is often rivalry, envy, or secrets long buried. The heart, it does not always rejoice as the lips proclaim." Before Hastings could protest, a ripple of unease passed through the crowd. The master of ceremonies, a portly man with a booming voice, had stepped forward to announce the toast, but Eleanor was nowhere to be seen. Charles, standing alone on the dais, looked about with growing concern, his smile replaced by a frown. Murmurs rose like a tide. Where was the bride? Had she stepped away for a moment? The quartet faltered, then resumed, as if to mask the growing disquiet. Poirot set down his glass, his posture stiffening. "Come, Hastings, let us ascertain the cause of this delay. The absence of a bride at her own wedding it is not a trivial matter." They moved toward the manor, where a cluster of bridesmaids whispered anxiously. The housekeeper, Mrs. Grimsby, a stout woman with a no-nonsense air, informed them that Eleanor had retired to the bridal suite to adjust her veil not 20 minutes prior. Poirot's request to see the room was met with a nod, and they ascended the grand staircase. The sounds of the celebration fading behind them, the bridal suite, a spacious chamber adorned with damask curtains and a four-poster bed, was silent. The door was locked, the key in place. Mrs. Grimsby knocked sharply, calling Eleanor's name, but there was no response. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he gestured for the footman to force the door. With a splintering groan, it gave way, revealing a room empty of its occupant. A champagne flute lay overturned on the carpet, its contents staining the pale fabric, and a single white rose, its petals bruised, rested beside it. The window was bolted, the curtains undisturbed. Poirot knelt beside the rose, his movements precise, almost reverent. "No sign of violence," he said softly. "Yet the room, it tells a story. The key in the lock, the bolted window. How does one vanish from such a place?" Hastings, peering over his shoulder, shook his head. "Perhaps she left through another door, or someone took her." Nan, Poirot replied, rising. The corridor was watched, the guests too numerous for an abduction unnoticed. "No, Hastings, this is a puzzle most intricate. The little gray cells, they are already at work." As the alarm spread and the guests began to search the manor and grounds, Poirot stood motionless, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The joyous occasion had taken a sinister turn, and he knew, with the certainty of his unmatched intellect, that this was no mere mishap. The vanished bride, as the case would come to be known, had begun. Chapter 2. The empty chamber, the grand staircase of Ashbourne Manor, its polished oak banisters gleaming under the chandelier's soft glow, bore witness to a growing unease as Hercule Poirot and Captain Arthur Hastings ascended to the bridal suite. The joyous clamor of the wedding below had muted into a restless murmur, like the hum of bees disturbed in their hive. Guests lingered in the marble-floored hall, their faces a mixture of curiosity and concern, whispering about the bride's inexplicable absence. Eleanor Winthrop, radiant only an hour before, had vanished from her own wedding, and the weight of that anomaly pressed upon the air like an impending storm. Poirot's small, precise steps echoed with purpose, his patent leather shoes clicking against the wood. His gray eyes, sharp as a falcon's, darted to every detail, the flicker of a maid's anxious glance, the way a footman's hand tightened on his tray. Hastings, trailing behind, mopped his brow with a handkerchief, his usual cheer replaced by a furrowed brow. "Dash it all, Poirot," he said, his voice low to avoid the ears of hovering guests. "This is the queerest thing. A bride doesn't just disappear in the middle of her wedding. Could she have taken ill? Or perhaps she's playing some sort of prank?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his impatience with such simplistic theories. "A prank, Menomi? None, none." The heart of Mademoiselle Eleanor, as seen in her eyes this morning, was not that of a jest. "Something has occurred, something deliberate. We shall see." They reached the landing, where Mrs. Grimsby, the housekeeper, stood ringing, her hands beside the heavy oak door of the bridal suite. Her gray hair, usually pinned with military precision, had slipped slightly, betraying her agitation. "Mr. Poirot, sir," she said, her voice trembling. "Miss Eleanor went in to fix her veil, as I told you. Not 20 minutes ago, it was. I've knocked and called, but there's no answer. The door's locked, and I daren't force it without Mr. Winthrop's say-so." Poirot's gaze settled on the door, its dark wood carved with intricate roses, a fitting portal for a bride. "Madame," he said, his tone calm but commanding, "we cannot wait for permissions when time is of the essence. The safety of Mademoiselle Eleanor is paramount. You, monsieur," he gestured to a burly footman hovering nearby, "open this door, s'il vous plaît." The footman, a young man named Thomas with a shock of red hair, hesitated only a moment before setting his shoulder to the task. The lock was sturdy, the key still in place on the inside, visible through the keyhole. With a grunt and a splintering groan, the door gave way, swinging inward to reveal the bridal suite in all its opulent stillness. The room was a vision of elegance, its walls draped in pale blue silk, the four-poster bed adorned with lace that matched the bride's veil. A gilt-edged mirror stood against one wall, reflecting the soft light from a crystal chandelier. A small table held a silver tray with a half-empty bottle of champagne and a single flute, now overturned, its contents pooling on the Aubusson carpet. Beside it, a white rose lay discarded, its petals bruised as if dropped in haste. The window, framed by heavy damask curtains, was bolted shut, its latch undisturbed. The air carried a faint sweetness, the lingering perfume of Eleanor's jasmine scent. Poirot stepped forward, his movements deliberate, as if the room itself were a witness to be questioned. He knelt beside the spilled champagne, his gloved fingers hovering over the stain without touching it. "Curio," he murmured. "The glass is not broken, yet it lies as if flung aside. And this rose, why is it here, alone, when the bride wore a bouquet?" Hastings peered over his shoulder, his face a mask of confusion. "Perhaps she dropped it in a hurry. But where could she have gone? The window's bolted, and the door was locked from the inside. It's impossible." Poirot's eyes gleamed with that peculiar light that signaled his mind at work. "Impossible, Hastings." "Nan, nothing is impossible when one employs the little gray cells. The locked door, the bolted window, they suggest a puzzle, not an impossibility. Observe, the key remains in the lock, yet the bride is gone. This is no magic trick, but a design most calculated." Mrs. Grimsby, hovering at the threshold, clasped her hands tightly. "Oh, sir, you don't think something dreadful has happened? Miss Eleanor was so happy, so full of life. She came up here to adjust her veil," she said, "because a pin had come loose. I saw her myself, not half an hour ago." Poirot turned to her, his expression softening but his gaze piercing. "Madame, you are certain no one entered or left this room after Mademoiselle Eleanor? The corridor, it was busy. Yes, sir," Mrs. Grimsby replied, nodding vigorously. "The upstairs hall was full of maids and footmen, preparing for the toast. No one could have passed without being seen, and I stood here myself for a time, keeping an eye out." "Bon," Poirot said, his voice a quiet murmur. "And yet, she is not here." Tell me, madame, this room, does it have another entrance? A servant's door, perhaps, or a passage? The housekeeper shook her head. None, sir. This is one of the old guest chambers, built solid. Just the one door and the window, and you see the state of them. Poirot's gaze swept the room once more, lingering on the mirror, the bed, the curtains. He approached the window, testing the bolt with a gentle tug. It held firm, the frame showing no signs of tampering. He turned to the wardrobe, a massive piece of mahogany, and opened its doors to reveal only gowns and a few hat boxes. No hidden exits, he said softly, almost to himself. Yet the bride has vanished. Fascinating. Hastings, pacing now, ran a hand through his hair. But Poirot, this is madness. If she didn't leave through the door or window, where is she? Could someone have taken her? Carried her off somehow? Poirot raised a hand, silencing his friend. Patience, mon ami. Let us not leap to conclusions. The facts, they must guide us. The door was locked from within, the key still present. The window is bolted. The room is empty, save for these small clues. The champagne, the rose. We must ask, why was the glass spilled? Why was the rose dropped? And where, precisely, is Mademoiselle Eleanor? He moved to the table, examining the champagne bottle. The cork was intact, the label pristine. He sniffed the air above the spilled liquid, his nose wrinkling slightly. No unusual odor, he noted. But we shall have this analyzed, to be certain. And the rose. He lifted it carefully, turning it in the light. A single petal fell, and he caught it, studying its bruised edge. This was not merely dropped. It was crushed, perhaps in a moment of distress. Mrs. Grimsby gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. Oh, sir, you don't think she was attacked? Poirot's expression remained inscrutable. I think. Nothing yet, madame. I observe, I reflect, I arrange the facts in order, but I assure you, we shall find the truth. The housekeeper was dismissed to summon Mr. Winthrop, Eleanor's father, while Poirot continued his inspection. He circled the room, tapping walls lightly, listening for hollow spaces. But the solid stone of Ashbourne Manor yielded no secrets. He paused at the mirror, tilting his head as if it might speak. Hastings, he said suddenly, what do you recall of the bride's demeanor today? Was she, perhaps, anxious, preoccupied? Hastings frowned, thinking back. She seemed the picture of happiness, Poirot, all smiles, clinging to Charles's arm. If anything, she was a bit flushed. But that's natural for a bride, isn't it? All the excitement and what-not. Precisement, Poirot said, his voice thoughtful. And yet, she retires to this room alone, for a simple adjustment of her veil. Why not call for her maid? Why lock the door? These are questions, Hastings, and the answers, they lie in the details. A commotion at the door announced the arrival of Mr. Reginald Winthrop, Eleanor's father, a portly man with a florid face and eyes red with worry. His morning coat was slightly askew, a testament to his haste. Mr. Poirot, he said, his voice hoarse, they tell me you're looking into this. Where's my daughter? What's happened to her? Poirot bowed slightly, his manner both courteous and commanding. Monsieur Winthrop, I share your distress. We are examining the circumstances of Mademoiselle Eleanor's absence. This room, it was locked when we arrived, the key inside. The window is bolted, yet your daughter is not here. Can you tell me, was she in good spirits this morning? Did she speak of any concerns? Winthrop shook his head, his jowls trembling. She was radiant, Mr. Poirot, happier than I've ever seen her. Charles is a fine young man, and she loved him dearly. There was no hint of trouble, none at all. I can't understand it. Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly. And this room, monsieur, it is one she knew well. She felt safe here. Of course, Winthrop replied, It's been her chamber since she was a girl, when she visited the manor. She chose it for today, said it felt like home. Bon, Poirot said, filing the information away. We shall need to speak with Monsieur Haverford, and perhaps others who were close to your daughter. For now, monsieur, I ask that you allow us to continue our inquiries. The manor must be searched, every corner. Winthrop nodded, his face crumpling. Find her, Mr. Poirot, please. As the older man was led away, Poirot turned to Hastings. The search, it will occupy the others. But we, Hastings, we shall focus on the mind of the murderer, for I suspect this is no mere disappearance. The locked room, the spilled champagne, the rose, these are the threads of a tapestry most sinister. Hastings paled. Murderer, Poirot, you can't mean it. We don't even know if she's harmed. Poirot's gaze was steady, unyielding. The heart, mon ami, it senses what the eyes cannot yet see. This room, it is empty, but it speaks. And Hercule Poirot, he listens. The search of Ashbourne Manor began in earnest. Guests and staff combing the sprawling grounds, the maze-like corridors, the dusty attics and cellars. Poirot remained in the bridal suite for a time, his small figure a still point in the chaos. He examined the carpet, noting the faint indentation where the champagne glass had fallen, and the rose, now carefully placed in a handkerchief for later analysis. He paced the room's perimeter, his fingers brushing the silk walls, seeking any anomaly, a hidden panel, a loose floorboard, but found none. Curio, he said again, pausing by the bed. The coverlet was undisturbed, the pillows pristine, yet something nagged at him, a detail just out of reach. He glanced at Hastings, who was peering out the window at the gardens below, where guests milled like ants. Hastings, tell me, who was near this room when Mademoiselle Eleanor entered? Who saw her last? Mrs. Grimsby recalled, confirmed, that Miss Lydia Crane had been in the corridor, delivering a message to a maid, and that Charles Haverford had lingered briefly to speak with Eleanor before returning to the ballroom. A few servants had passed through, but none had entered the suite. Poirot listened intently, his mind cataloguing each detail like a ledger. And Monsieur Marshall, Poirot asked suddenly, the cousin who arrived uninvited, where was he? Mrs. Grimsby frowned. I saw him in the hall earlier, sir, smoking a cigarette near the staircase. He seemed restless, but I thought nothing of it. He's a strange one, that Mr. Marshall. Merci, madame, Poirot said, dismissing her. To Hastings, he added, we must speak with these three: Haverford, Crane, and Marshall. Each, I suspect, holds a piece of this puzzle. As they descended to rejoin the search, the manor's clock struck 4, its chimes a mournful toll. The joyous occasion had fractured, and Poirot knew, with the certainty of his unmatched intellect, that the empty chamber was but the first act in a drama of deception. The little grey cells were awake, and they would not rest until the truth was laid bare. Chapter 3. The discovery. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting Ashbourne Manor in a twilight glow that lent its ancient stones an air of somber mystery. 2 days had passed since Eleanor Winthrop's inexplicable disappearance from her wedding, and the initial flurry of hope had given way to a creeping dread. The guests, once buoyant with celebration, had largely dispersed, leaving behind a skeleton staff and a handful of family members who lingered in the vain hope of news. Hercule Poirot, undeterred by the lack of immediate answers, had spent the intervening hours methodically interviewing servants, examining the grounds, and revisiting the bridal suite, where the spilled champagne and bruised rose remained vivid in his mind's eye. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever loyal, followed his friend's lead, though his impatience was evident in the restless tap of his foot as they stood in the manor's library, awaiting further developments. Monsieur Poirot, Hastings said, his voice tinged with frustration, we've turned this place upside down. The gardens, the stables, even the attics. Nothing, it's as if she's been spirited away by ghosts. Surely we must call in the police now. Poirot perched on the edge of a leather armchair, his hands folded neatly over his patent leather shoes, gave a slight shake of his head. Patience, mon ami. The police, they will come when the time is right, but their methods, they trample the delicate threads of truth. We must first understand the why and the how. The little gray cells, they are not idle. Before Hastings could protest, a sharp cry echoed from the east wing, piercing the evening's quiet. Footsteps pounded down the corridor, and a breathless gardener, his face streaked with dirt, burst into the library. "Mr. Poirot, sir, you must come quick. It sits Miss Eleanor." Poirot was on his feet in an instant, his small frame radiating urgency. "Where, monsieur? Speak clearly." "In the old storeroom, sir, in the east wing. I was checking the grounds, and the door was ajar. I looked inside, and oh, God, she's there, but she's not moving." Hastings paled, but Poirot's expression hardened into one of intense focus. "Lead us, vite," he commanded, and the trio hurried through the manor's labyrinthine halls, the gardener's lantern casting flickering shadows on the paneled walls. The east wing, rarely used, and shrouded in dust, was a warren of forgotten rooms, its air heavy with the scent of mildew and time. The storeroom, tucked behind a faded tapestry, was a small, windowless chamber, its door of weathered oak standing slightly open, as if mocking the secrecy it had preserved. Poirot pushed past the gardener, his hand raised to halt Hastings. "Stay back, mon ami, until I have seen." He stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim light of the lantern. There, slumped against a stack of moldering crates, was Eleanor Winthrop, her ivory wedding gown pristine but for a faint smudge of dust. At the hem, her auburn curls framed a face now waxen and still, her eyes closed as if in sleep. The delicate lace of her veil, still pinned in place, seemed a cruel parody of the joy she had embodied only days before. Poirot knelt beside her, his movements precise, almost reverent. He touched her wrist, finding it cold, and noted the faint bluish tinge to her lips. A subtle odor, sharp and bitter like almonds, hung in the air, faint but unmistakable. "Cyanide," he murmured, his voice low, "a poison most swift and merciless." Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, recoiled. "Good Lord, Poirot, poisoned here, in a locked room. This is madness." "Locked, you say?" Poirot's eyes flicked to the door, its heavy iron lock dangling open, the key nowhere in sight. He rose, examining the room with meticulous care. The storeroom was cluttered with relics of the manor's past, broken furniture, faded portraits, a tarnished silver candelabrum, but there were no signs of struggle. The dust on the floor was undisturbed, save for a single set of footprints, small and delicate, matching the size of Eleanor's satin slippers. A thin trail of dust led to the crates where she lay, as if she had walked there willingly and collapsed. Poirot's gaze settled on the lock. "This door," he said, running a finger along its edge, "was locked when the gardener found it. The gardener, trembling at the doorway, shook his head. "No, sir, it was ajar, like I said. I'd never have looked inside otherwise. That room's been shut up for years." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. "Ajar now, but locked before, perhaps. And the key, where is it? This is no coincidence, Hastings. The room, the poison, the missing key, they form a puzzle most intricate." He turned back to Eleanor's body, noting a small folded paper clutched in her hand. With gloved fingers, he eased it free, unfolding it to reveal a brief handwritten note. "Meet me in the storeroom, Merchant Fee." The handwriting was bold, almost careless, and the paper bore the faint scent of tobacco. Poirot slipped it into his pocket, his expression unreadable. Hastings, his face a mask of horror, whispered, "Who could do this, Poirot? To kill her on her wedding day, in such a place, it's monstrous." "Monstrous, oui, but calculated, Poirot replied. The cyanide, it is not a weapon of impulse. It requires preparation, knowledge. And this storeroom, so remote, why here? Why not the bridal suite, where she was last seen? He summoned the housekeeper, Mrs. Grimsby, who arrived with Dr. Langley, the local physician, in tow. The doctor, a wiry man with a grave demeanor, confirmed Poirot's suspicion after a brief examination. Cyanide, without a doubt, he said, his voice heavy. Administered within the last 48 hours, likely in a drink or food. Death would have been near instantaneous. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing the details. And the storeroom, doctor, any signs of how she came to be here? Dr. Langley shook his head. None. The body shows no marks of violence, no bruises or scratches. She wasn't dragged here. It's as if she walked in and died. Poirot turned to Mrs. Grimsby. Madame, who knew of this storeroom? It is not a place one stumbles upon by chance. The housekeeper, her eyes red-rimmed, wrung her hands. It's been locked for years, sir, used only for old family things. The staff avoided tits damp and forgotten. But as children, Miss Eleanor and Miss Lydia used to play here, hiding in the passages. And Mr. Victor, the cousin, he visited often in his youth. He'd know it too. Passages. Poirot's eyes gleamed. There are hidden ways to this room. Mrs. Grimsby nodded. An old servant's passage, sir, behind the library. It's been boarded up for decades, but the children found it when they were young. I can show you, if you'd like. Later, madam, Poirot said. First we must secure this room. No one is to enter until I have examined it further. He dismissed the housekeeper and doctor, then turned to Hastings. The note, mon ami, with its single initial V, it points to Monsieur Victor Marshall, the uninvited guest, and yet I wonder, is it too convenient? The murderer, he does not leave such clues, unless he wishes them to be found. Hastings frowned. You think it's a plant, but who else could it be? Charles, perhaps. He's the groom. After all, maybe a quarrel gone wrong. Poirot shook his head. Monsieur Haverford's grief, it appears genuine, though appearances, they can deceive. And Mademoiselle Crane, who brought the champagne her role, cannot be ignored. We must speak with them all, but first, I must see this passage. They followed Mrs. Grimsby to the library, where she revealed a concealed panel behind a bookcase, its hinges rusted but intact. The passage, narrow and cobwebbed, stretched into darkness, its air thick with dust. Poirot peered inside, his lantern illuminating a faint trail of disturbed dust, as if someone had passed recently. This, he said, is how the murderer moved unseen. But to what purpose? To hide the body, or to stage a scene? He stepped back, his mind racing. The storeroom, the poison, the note, the passage, all were pieces of a meticulously crafted puzzle. We have a murder, Hastings, he said, his voice low. Not an accident, not a suicide, but a crime of cold precision. The cyanide, it was chosen for its speed. The storeroom, for its secrecy. And the note, perhaps, for its misdirection. As the police were finally summoned, their heavy boots echoing through the manor, Poirot stood by Eleanor's body, his expression one of quiet determination. The discovery of her death had transformed the mystery of the vanished bride into something far darker. The clues were few, but they were enough for Hercule Poirot. The little gray cells were at work, and the truth, however deeply buried, would not elude him for long. Chapter 4. The Groom's Tale. The morning after the grim discovery of Eleanor Winthrop's body, Ashbourne Manor seemed to sag under the weight of its tragedy. The vibrant hues of the wedding decorations, still draped across the halls, now appeared garish, a mockery of the joy they had been meant to celebrate. The air was thick with the scent of wilting flowers and the murmur of hushed voices, as the remaining guests and family members gathered in small, somber clusters. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable suit a stark contrast to the disarray around him, sat in the manor's library, a room of dark oak shelves and heavy velvet curtains that seemed to absorb the light. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the window, gazing out at the mist-shrouded gardens, his usual buoyancy replaced by a restless unease. "This is a bad business, Poirot," Hastings said, turning from the window. "Poor Eleanor, poisoned in that wretched storeroom. And Charles, have you seen him? The man's a wreck. Do you think he could have—" He trailed off, unwilling to voice the suspicion. Poirot, seated at a mahogany writing desk, adjusted his tie with precise fingers. "Monsieur Haverford's grief, it is profound, oui. But grief, mon ami, can mask many things: guilt, fear, or even calculation. We must speak with him, for he was closest to the victim. The heart of the groom, it may hold the key to this mystery." A soft knock announced the arrival of Charles Haverford. The young man entered, his handsome features marred by dark circles under his eyes and a pallor that spoke of sleepless nights. His morning suit had been replaced by a plain tweed jacket, but the dishevelment of his hair and the tremor in his hands betrayed his distress. He sank into a chair opposite Poirot, clutching a brandy glass as if it were a lifeline. "Mr. Poirot," Charles said, his voice hoarse, "they say you're the man to find out what happened to Eleanor. I can't believe she's gone. It's like a nightmare I can't wake from." Poirot's gray eyes studied him, noting the slight quiver of his lip, the way his fingers tightened around the glass. "Monsieur Haverford, my condolences for your loss. But to find the truth, I must ask questions, even those that pain you. Tell me, when did you last see your bride, and in what state was she?" Charles swallowed, his gaze fixed on the carpet. "It was just after the ceremony, in the ballroom. She was radiant, laughing with the guests, her eyes shining. She said she needed to fix her veil pin had come loose, she said. I offered to go with her, but she insisted I stay and greet our families. That was the last I saw of her." His voice broke, and he took a shaky sip of brandy. Poirot leaned forward, his tone gentle but probing. "And in that moment, monsieur, did she seem troubled? Did anyone approach her, perhaps with a message or a drink?" Charles shook his head. "No, she was happy, I swear it. The only person who went near her was Lydia Miss Crane. She brought Eleanor a glass of champagne, said it was to toast our future. Eleanor smiled and took it, but I didn't see her drink. I was called away by my uncle, and then she was gone." Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his interest. "This champagne, delivered by Mademoiselle Crane, is most significant. And you, monsieur, you remained in the ballroom. Can anyone confirm this?" Charles nodded eagerly. "Dozens of people. My uncle, Lord Winthrop, was with me, and so were half the guests. I never left the room until we heard she was missing." Poirot made a mental note, his mind turning to the timeline. The ballroom, crowded with witnesses, made Charles's alibi plausible, but alibis, he knew, could be crafted. "Monsieur, there are rumors, forgive my bluntness, of your financial difficulties. A marriage to Mademoiselle Eleanor, it would have brought a dowry, perhaps." Charles flushed, his eyes flashing with indignation. "You think I'd kill her for money?" "Eleanor's fortune was modest, Mr. Poirot. Her father's estate is tied up in trusts, and I have prospects of my own, a position in a London firm, starting next month. I loved her, not her money." He slammed the glass down, brandy sloshing onto the desk. Poirot raised a placating hand. "Calm yourself, monsieur. I seek only the truth. Tell me, this storeroom where your bride was found, did you know of it?" Charles hesitated, his anger subsiding into unease. "Vaguely. Eleanor mentioned it once, years ago, when we were courting. She said she and Lydia used to play there as children, hiding from governesses, but I've never been inside. It's a dusty old place, forgotten by everyone. Forgotten, perhaps, but not by all, Poirot murmured. He leaned back, his fingers steepled. And Monsieur Victor Marshall, the cousin who arrived uninvited, did you know him well? Charles's jaw tightened. Not well. He's a Winthrop cousin, but Eleanor rarely spoke of him. He showed up at the last minute, claiming he wanted to celebrate with us. I found him unsettling. Kept watching Eleanor, like he was sizing her up. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Most interesting. And did you observe any discord between him and your bride? No, nothing overt, Charles admitted. But Eleanor seemed uneasy when he spoke to her during the reception. She brushed it off, said it was just family history. I didn't press. Her Poirot nodded, filing away the information. Merci, Monsieur Haverford. You have been most helpful. Rest now, but remain at the manor. I may have further questions. As Charles rose, his movements unsteady, he paused at the door. Find who did this, Mr. Poirot, please, for Eleanor. Poirot inclined his head, his expression unreadable. The truth, monsieur, it will be found. Hercule Poirot does not fail. Once Charles had gone, Hastings turned to Poirot, his brow furrowed. What do you make of him, Poirot? He seems genuinely heartbroken, but those debts, you think there's something to it? Poirot rose, pacing the room with measured steps. Monsieur Haverford, he plays the part of the grieving groom well, but the little grey cells, they are not convinced. His alibi, it is strong, yet too perfect, perhaps, and his knowledge of the storeroom, though vague, is troubling. We must verify his movements with this Lord Winthrop. But it is the champagne, Hastings, delivered by Mademoiselle Crane, that intrigues me most. Was it the vehicle for the poison? And if so, who placed it there? Hastings frowned. You don't think Lydia could be involved, do you? She was Eleanor's closest friend. Friendship, mon ami. It can conceal envy, resentment, even hatred, Poirot said. We must speak with Mademoiselle Crane, and soon. But first, I wish to examine the ballroom where this champagne was poured. The smallest detail, it may illuminate the path. They made their way to the ballroom, a grand space with crystal chandeliers and polished parquet floors, now eerily silent. The remnants of the wedding feast, half-a-ton plates of salmon and scattered rose petals, lay abandoned on long tables. Poirot moved to the refreshment area, where a silver tray still held a few flutes of champagne, their bubbles long since faded. He sniffed one cautiously, detecting nothing but the faint tank of wine. The champagne, he said. It is the link between the bridal suite and the storeroom. If the cyanide was in the glass Mademoiselle Crane delivered, how did it come to be there? Was it tampered with in the ballroom, or earlier? Hastings, inspecting a nearby table, pointed to a small silver bucket. Look here, Poirot, an ice bucket, still half full. Could someone have slipped something into the champagne while it was being poured? Poirot examined the bucket, noting a faint ring of condensation on the tablecloth. Possible, but risky, in a crowded room. The poisoner, he is clever, methodical. He does not rely on chance. He turned to a footman hovering nearby, a nervous youth named James, Monsieur, who handled the champagne during the reception. James swallowed, his eyes darting. The staff, sir, mostly me and Tom. Miss Lydia asked for a glass special for Miss Eleanor, said it was a tradition. I poured it from the bottle there. He pointed to an empty bottle of Krug, and she took it up herself. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And you saw no one tamper with the bottle or the glass? No, sir, James said. It was hectic, though people everywhere, toasting and laughing. I couldn't watch every moment. Merci, Poirot said. Dismissing the footman, he turned to Hastings, his voice low. The bottle, it is empty, and thus tells us nothing. But Mademoiselle Crane's role grows clearer. She delivered the champagne, and she alone saw Eleanor in the suite. We must question her, and we must find this Monsieur Marshall. His name, it appears in the note V. It is too neat, perhaps, but we cannot ignore it. As they left the ballroom, the weight of the mystery pressed heavier on Poirot's shoulders. Charles Haverford's tale had provided clarity, but also new questions. The groom's alibi, the champagne, the storeroom's obscurity, all were threads in a tapestry of deception. Poirot's little grey cells were alight, piecing together the fragments of a crime that was as deliberate as it was devastating. The truth, he knew, was close, but it would require all his skill to uncover it before the shadows of Ashbourne Manor swallowed it whole. Chapter 5. The Rival's Secret. The rose garden of Ashbourne Manor, bathed in the soft light of late morning, was a haven of tranquility. Its blooms a vivid contrast to the dark tragedy unfolding within the manor's walls. The air carried the sweet scent of roses, mingled with the faint dampness of dew still clinging to the petals. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable suit slightly at odds with the natural setting, stood beside a trellis laden with crimson flowers, his sharp grey eyes fixed on Miss Lydia Crane as she approached. Captain Arthur Hastings, ever his companion, lingered a few paces back, his expression one of quiet concern. The maid of honor, clad in a simple grey dress that seemed to mirror her somber mood, moved with a hesitancy that Poirot noted at once. "Mademoiselle Crane," Poirot began, his voice smooth but with an edge of authority. "I thank you for meeting me here. The garden, it is a place of beauty, but also of secrets, and I believe you hold secrets that may illuminate the death of Mademoiselle Eleanor." Lydia's auburn hair, so like Eleanor's, caught the sunlight as she stopped beside a rose bush, her fingers twisting a linen handkerchief. Her green eyes, usually bright with wit, were shadowed with something Poirot could not yet name: grief, fear, or perhaps guilt. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice low, "I don't know what you expect me to say. Eleanor was my dearest friend. Her death sits broken my heart." Poirot tilted his head, his mustache quivering slightly as he studied her. "The heart, mademoiselle, it is a complex thing. It loves, it grieves, but it also conceals. Let us speak plainly. You are the last to see Mademoiselle Eleanor alive, in the bridal suite, with a glass of champagne you delivered. This is correct." "Nan." Lydia's cheeks flushed, and she looked away, her gaze settling on a rose whose petals had begun to wilt. "Yes, I took her the champagne. It was a tradition we always toasted each other at special moments. I thought it would cheer her. She was so radiant, so full of life." Her voice faltered, and she pressed the handkerchief to her lips. Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the slight tremor in her hands. "And yet, mademoiselle, this champagne, it is significant. The doctor believes the cyanide that killed your friend was likely administered in a drink. You brought her the glass, and now she is dead. You understand why I must ask what was in that champagne." Lydia's head snapped up, her eyes flashing with indignation. "Are you accusing me, Mr. Poirot? I loved Eleanor like a sister. I would never harm her. The champagne was from the same bottle as the others in the ballroom. I poured it myself, and I swear it was untouched." Poirot raised a hand, his gesture calming but firm. "I accuse no one, mademoiselle, not yet. But the truth, it requires scrutiny. You say you poured the champagne yourself. Did anyone approach you as you carried it to the suite? Did you leave it unattended, even for a moment?" Lydia hesitated, her brow furrowing as she retraced her steps. "No, I don't think so. It was chaotic in the ballroom, guests everywhere, toasting and laughing. I took the glass from James, the footman, and went straight upstairs. I didn't stop, and I didn't let anyone near it." Poirot nodded, though his expression remained inscrutable. And when you gave it to Mademoiselle Eleanor, what was her demeanor? Did she drink at once, or did she set it down? She took it with a smile, Lydia said, her voice softening at the memory. She said, "To our future, Lydia," and raised the glass, but I don't recall if she drank. I left right after. She was fussing with her veil, and I didn't want to intrude. She seemed distracted perhaps, but I thought it was just the excitement of the day. Distracted, Poirot repeated, his tone thoughtful. And this distraction, Mademoiselle, did she mention a note, perhaps, or a meeting? We found a paper in her hand, signed with a V. Does this suggest anything to you? Lydia's face paled, and her fingers tightened on the handkerchief, twisting it into a knot. A note. No, she didn't mention anything like that. As for V, it must be Victor Marshall, her cousin. He was at the wedding, uninvited. And Eleanor wasn't pleased to see him. She said he brought back old memories, ones she'd rather forget. Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. Old memories, mademoiselle. Of what nature? Lydia bit her lip, her gaze darting to the ground. I don't know the details. Eleanor was private about her past, even with me. But Victor, he was part of their childhood here at the manor. They were close once, but something happened years ago, before she met Charles. She never spoke of it, but I could tell it troubled her. Poirot stepped closer, his voice low and insistent. And you, mademoiselle, what is your connection to Monsieur Haverford? I have observed your glances at him, the way your smile falters when he speaks of Eleanor. There is more than friendship in your heart, is there not? Lydia's flush deepened, and she turned away, her shoulders stiffening. You're mistaken, Mr. Poirot. Charles I was Eleanor's husband. I cared for him as a friend, nothing more. I wanted her happiness, always. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his skepticism. The heart, mademoiselle, it does not lie as easily as the tongue. You disapproved of this marriage, perhaps. You felt Monsieur Haverford was not worthy of your friend. Lydia spun too. Face him, her eyes blazing. He wasn't right for her. Charles is charming, yes, but too ambitious, too polished. He swept her off her feet, but I worried he cared more for her name than her heart. I told her so, but she wouldn't listen. She was blinded by love. Her voice cracked, and she looked away, tears glistening in her eyes. Poirot watched her closely, noting the raw emotion in her words. And this storeroom, where Mademoiselle Eleanor was found, were you familiar with it? Lydia's breath caught, and she nodded slowly. Yes, from when we were children. We used to play there, sneaking through the passages to hide from our governess. It was our secret place, full of old trunks and forgotten things. But I haven't been there in years, not since we grew up. Poirot's gaze softened, though his mind remained sharp. Merci, mademoiselle, you have given me much to consider. But one last question. Did you see Monsieur Victor Marshall near the ballroom, perhaps near the champagne, during the reception? Lydia frowned, her brow creasing as she thought. I'm not sure. He was there, mingling with the guests, but I don't recall him near the refreshment table. He kept to himself mostly, watching everyone. He always made me uneasy. Poirot inclined his head. You may go, mademoiselle, but remain at the manor. The truth, it is close, and I will need to speak with you again. As Lydia walked away, her steps quick and unsteady, Hastings joined Poirot, his expression troubled. She's hiding something, Poirot. I'm sure of it. That business about Charles, there's more to it than she's letting on. Poirot nodded, his eyes fixed on the retreating figure. Oui, mon ami. Mademoiselle Crane. She is a woman, torn by love, by loyalty, by fear. Her affection for Monsieur Haverford, it is evident, though she denies it, and her knowledge of the storeroom, it places her at the heart of this mystery. But is she the poisoner, or merely a pawn in another's game? Hastings rubbed his chin. And this Victor Marshall, is right. He's an odd sort. That note with the V-points. Straight to him. Do you think he's our man? Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. The note. It is too convenient. Hastings. A murderer who signs his work so boldly. It is either arrogance or misdirection. We must speak with Monsieur Marshall, but first. I wish to revisit the storeroom. The passage Mademoiselle Crane mentioned may hold clues we have overlooked. They made their way back to the manor, the rose garden's beauty fading behind them. Poirot's mind was a whirl of details. Lydia's trembling hands, her veiled confession of love for Charles, her childhood knowledge of the storeroom's secrets, the champagne, the note, the cyanide, all were pieces of a puzzle that grew more intricate with each revelation. As they approached the east wing, Poirot's steps quickened, his little gray cells alight with the certainty that the rival's secret was but one thread in the tapestry of Eleanor's murder. The truth, he knew, was hidden in the shadows of Ashburn Manor, waiting for Hercule Poirot to bring it into the light. Chapter 6. The Mysterious Guest. The library of Ashburn Manor, with its towering shelves and the faint musty scent of old leather, was a sanctuary of quiet amidst the storm of tragedy that had engulfed the estate. The late afternoon light filtered through heavy velvet curtains, casting long shadows across the room where Hercule Poirot sat, his small, precise figure poised in a high-backed chair. Captain Arthur Hastings stood near a globe, idly spinning it, his face etched with the unease that had grown with each passing hour since Eleanor Winthrop's body was discovered. The air held a chill, despite the summer's warmth, as if the manor itself mourned its lost bride. Poirot's gray eyes, sharp and unyielding, were fixed on the doorway as Mr. Victor Marshall entered. The man was lean and angular, his dark hair slicked back, his sardonic smile a mask that seemed to challenge scrutiny. His gray suit, though well-tailored, carried a faint air of wear, and the cigarette he held between his fingers sent a thin curl of smoke into the air. Poirot noted the steadiness of his hands, the cool detachment in his gaze, qualities of a man accustomed to keeping secrets. Monsieur Marshall, Poirot began, his voice smooth but with a steel undertone. I thank you for joining me. The death of Mademoiselle Eleanor. It is a matter most grave, and I believe you may hold pieces of this puzzle. Shall we speak frankly? Marshall exhaled a plume of smoke, his smile unwavering. Frankly, Mr. Poirot, I'm not sure what you expect me to say. I barely knew Eleanor. A charming girl, a tragic end, that's all I have to offer. He took a seat, crossing one leg over the other with studied nonchalance. Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his skepticism. Barely knew her, monsieur. Yet you arrived at her wedding uninvited, a distant cousin who felt compelled to attend at the last moment. This is curious, Nan. And I have learned you spoke with her during the reception, a conversation that left her unsettled. What was discussed? Marshall's eyes narrowed slightly, though his smile held. Idle chatter, nothing more. I congratulated her, asked about her plans. She seemed distracted, as brides often are. I didn't think much of it. Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. Distracted, you say? And yet others observed you watching her closely, with an intensity most particular. There is history between you and Mademoiselle Eleanor, is there not? Mademoiselle Crane mentioned old memories, ones your cousin wished to forget. Marshall's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, and he took a slow drag on his cigarette before responding. Lydia Crane likes to stir up drama, doesn't she? Yes, Eleanor and I were close as children, playing in this dusty old pile. But that was years ago. People grow up, move on. I had no reason to wish her harm. Poirot's fingers steepled, his expression unreadable. And yet, monsieur, we found a note in Mademoiselle Eleanor's hand, signed with a V. It urged her to meet in the storeroom, where she was found dead. The handwriting, it is bold, like that of a man who smokes strong cigarettes, and carries himself with confidence. You are familiar with this storeroom, from your childhood games. Marshall's composure wavered, his fingers tightening on the cigarette. A note. That's absurd. I wrote no such thing. As for the storeroom, sure, I knew it as a boy, Eleanor, Lydia, and I used to sneak in there, pretending to be pirates or spies. But I haven't set foot in it since I was 12. You're barking up the wrong tree, Poirot. Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. The tree, monsieur, it is not yet chosen. But the note, it bears your initial, and your presence here, it is not without motive. Tell me, what brought you to this wedding, unannounced, after years of absence? Marshall shrugged, his smile returning, though it lacked its earlier ease. A whim, nothing more. I heard about the wedding through a mutual acquaintance and thought I'd pay my respects. The Winthrops are family, after all. However distant, I meant no harm. Poirot nodded, though his mind was far from satisfied. And during the reception, monsieur, did you approach the refreshment table, perhaps near the champagne that Mademoiselle Crane delivered to the bride? Marshall's laugh was sharp, almost mocking. Champagne. I don't touch the stuff too sweet for my taste. I stuck to whiskey, and I kept my distance from the crowd. Ask anyone. Poirot's gaze did not waver. I shall, monsieur. And this storeroom, with its hidden passage, did you ever explore such passages as a child? They are not known to all, yet they may be key to this mystery. Marshall's eyes flicked to the side, a fleeting sign of unease. Passages. Vaguely. The manor's full of old secret squeaky panels, dusty tunnels. We found a few as kids, but I couldn't tell you where they lead now. It's been too long. Merci. Monsieur Marshall, Poirot said, rising with a slight bow. You have been most cooperative. But remain at the manor, if you please. I may have further questions. As Marshall left, his cigarette trailing smoke, Hastings turned to Poirot, his brow furrowed. He's slippery, Poirot. That cool demeanor, almost too perfect. Do you think he's our man? Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. The note, it is too convenient, Hastings. A murderer who signs his work so boldly. It is either arrogance or misdirection. We must verify his movements during the reception, but first I wish to revisit the storeroom and its passage. There is something there we have not yet seen. They left the library, traversing the manor's dim corridors to the east wing, where the storeroom lay like a silent sentinel of secrets. The door, now sealed by the police, was opened at Poirot's request, revealing the same grim scene, the crates, the dust, the faint almond-like odor of cyanide lingering in the air. Poirot moved with purpose, his magnifying glass in hand, examining the floor where Eleanor's footprints remained. He traced them to the back wall, where Mrs. Grimsby had indicated a hidden panel. With Hastings's help, he located the panel, a seamless part of the woodwork that yielded with a soft creak. The passage beyond was narrow, its stone walls damp, and webbed with cobwebs. Poirot's lantern cast a feeble glow, revealing a trail of disturbed dust, as if someone had passed recently. The passage wound behind the library, emerging at a concealed door, disguised as a bookcase. Poirot tested the mechanism, finding it stiff but functional. This passage, he said, his voice echoing softly, it is the key to the impossible. The murderer, he lured Mademoiselle Eleanor to the storeroom, perhaps with the note, and escaped through here, locking the door behind him. But the key, where is it? Hastings frowned, brushing dust from his sleeve. If Marshall used the passage, he could have slipped out unseen. But why leave the note? It's practically a confession. Precisement, Poirot replied. The note, it is a challenge or a deception. We must learn more of Monsieur Marshall's past with Eleanor. What memories did she wish to forget? And we must confirm the movements of Mademoiselle Crane and Monsieur Haverford. The champagne, the note, the passage, they are threads, but the pattern is not yet clear. They returned to the library, where Poirot requested the guest list and staff accounts of the reception. A footman confirmed Marshall's claim of drinking whiskey, but another recalled seeing him near the refreshment table, speaking briefly with a servant. This contradiction piqued Poirot's interest. He also learned from Mrs. Grimsby that Victor had once proposed to Eleanor, years before, only to be rejected, a detail neither Marshall nor Lydia had mentioned. As evening fell, Poirot stood alone in the library, his mind a whirl of possibilities. Marshall's evasiveness, his childhood knowledge of the Manor's secrets, and the notes damning V painted him as a suspect, yet Poirot's instincts warned of a deeper game. The mysterious guest was a piece of the puzzle, but whether he was the mastermind or a pawn remained to be seen. The little gray cells were restless, and Hercule Poirot knew the truth was closer than ever, hidden in the shadows of Ashbourne Manor. Chapter 7. The clue of the Keith. Evening shadows stretched long across Ashbourne Manor, their dark fingers creeping over the ancient stone floors as if to guard the secrets buried within. The air in the east wing carried a damp chill, and the faint echo of footsteps reverberated through the silent corridors. Hercule Poirot, his small frame wrapped in a meticulously tailored overcoat, stood once more in the storeroom where Eleanor Winthrop's body had been found. The room, with its clutter of forgotten relics and the lingering scent of cyanide, seemed to pulse with the weight of its grim discovery. Captain Arthur Hastings, lantern in hand, hovered at the threshold, his face a mixture of curiosity and unease as he watched Poirot's meticulous inspection. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low to avoid disturbing the stillness, "we've been over this room twice already. The police have combed it too. What more can we find? The cyanide, the note, it's all pointing to Marshall, isn't it?" Poirot, kneeling beside a dusty crate, paused to adjust his pince-nez, his gray eyes glinting in the lantern's glow. "Mon ami, the obvious, it is often a trap. The note with its V, the cyanide, these are bold strokes, but the truth, it lies in the subtleties. This storeroom, it was chosen for a reason, and the key that locked it, it is missing. That absence, Hastings, it speaks louder than any note." He rose, brushing a speck of dust from his sleeve, and turned his attention to the heavy oak door, its iron lock dangling open like a silent accusation. The police, in their haste, had dismissed the lock as unremarkable, but Poirot's little gray cells demanded a closer look. He produced his magnifying glass, its lens catching the light as he examined the lock's mechanism. The metal was old, pitted with age, but showed no signs of tampering, no scratches, no forced entry. The key, however, was nowhere to be found, a fact that had puzzled the local constabulary, and now consumed Poirot's thoughts. "This lock," Poirot murmured, almost to himself, "it was engaged when the body was discovered, yet the door was ajar. The gardener, he insists it was so. But a locked room without a key, this is no accident. The murderer, he planned this carefully, perhaps to create an illusion of impossibility." Hastings frowned, shifting the lantern to better illuminate the door. "But how, Poirot? If the key was inside with Eleanor, how did it vanish? And if it was outside, how did the murderer lock the door and escape without being seen?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. "Hastings, the key, it is the heart of this mystery. We must find it, or understand why it is hidden. Come, let us explore this passage once more. The answer, it may lie in its shadows." They moved to the concealed panel at the back of the storeroom, its outline barely visible in the dim light. Poirot pressed the panel, and it creaked open, revealing the narrow cobwebbed passage that wound behind the library. The air within was thick with dust, and the lantern's beam revealed a faint trail of footprints, more like Eleanor's, but also a larger set, less distinct, as if someone had taken care to obscure their tracks. Poirot knelt, his magnifying glass hovering over the floor, and his fingers brushed a small, metallic object lodged in a crack between the stones. "Voila," he exclaimed, holding aloft a delicate ornate key, its brass surface tarnished but intact. The key was small, designed for an old lock, and its intricate filigree matched the storeroom's door. This, Hastings, is the clue we seek. The key to the storeroom, hidden in the passage. The murderer, he used it to lock the door, then fled through here, concealing his escape. Hastings's eyes widened. Good heavens, Poirot. That means someone knew the passage well enough to use it, someone like Marshall, or perhaps Lydia, from their childhood games. Poirot nodded, slipping the key into his pocket. We, or another, who learned the manor's secrets. But why hide the key here, so close to the crime? It is a risk. Unless the murderer wished it to be found later, perhaps, when suspicion had shifted elsewhere. They followed the passage, its stone walls pressing close, until it emerged behind the library's bookcase. Poirot examined the bookcase's hidden latch, finding it well-oiled, suggesting recent use. This passage, he said, it is not as forgotten as the housekeeper believes. Someone has passed through here, and recently. The dust, it is disturbed, but not enough to suggest frequent traffic. A single journey, perhaps on the day of the murder. Returning to the storeroom, Poirot's attention shifted to the crates near Eleanor's body. He inspected them closely, noting a faint smudge on one, a smear of what appeared to be ash, as from a cigarette. The scent of tobacco, faint but distinct, lingered near the crate, reminding him of Victor Marshall's ever-present cigarette. Yet the smudge was too vague to be conclusive, and Poirot's mind cautioned against hasty assumptions. He turned to Hastings, his voice low. The key, the passage, the ash, these are threads, mon ami, but they do not yet form a pattern. We must learn more of the note found in Mademoiselle Eleanor's hand. Its handwriting, it must be compared to Monsieur Marshall's, and we must ascertain who had access to cyanide. Hastings rubbed his chin. Cyanide's not something you pick up at the chemist's, Poirot. It's industrial, or medical, isn't it? Could Marshall have gotten hold of it? Or perhaps Charles, with his Detsy Midov, had connections? Poirot's eyes gleamed. A good question, Hastings. Cyanide, it is not common, but it is not impossible to obtain. A chemist, a gardener, even a photographer might have access. We must inquire discreetly, and Mademoiselle Cranchy delivered the champagne, yet denies tampering. Her story, it must be tested. They left the storeroom, sealing it once more, and sought out Mrs. Grimsby, who was overseeing the removal of the wilting wedding decorations. The housekeeper, her face drawn with fatigue, confirmed that the manor's gardener used cyanide in small quantities for pest control, kept under lock and key in a shed. Only Mr. Dawson, the head gardener, has access, she said, and he's been with the family for 30 years. A good man, sir, not one to be careless. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing the information. And Monsieur Marshall, Madame, did he ever show an interest in the gardens, or perhaps in chemicals? Mrs. Grimsby frowned. Not that I recall, sir. He was always more for cards and talk than outdoor work, but as a boy he was curious, always poking about where he shouldn't. He'd have known where the shed was, I suppose. Poirot thanked her and turned to Hastings. The cyanide, it is a clue, but not yet a solution. We must also consider the note. I will request a sample of Monsieur Marshall's handwriting from the guest book he signed upon arrival, and Mademoiselle Cranchy must be questioned again, for her role in the champagne grows ever more critical. They returned to the library, where Poirot examined the guest book, finding Marshall's signature bold, looping scrawl that bore a striking resemblance to the note's handwriting. Yet something in its flourish, its deliberate flair, gave Poirot pause. It is too perfect, he murmured. A man who writes such a note, he does not leave it in the victim's hand unless he wishes to be suspected or to cast suspicion elsewhere. Hastings, pacing the room, stopped short. You think it's a frame, Poirot. Someone trying to pin this on Marshall. Perhaps, Poirot said, his voice thoughtful, or perhaps Monsieur Marshall is not as clever as he believes. We must also consider Monsieur Haverford's debts good. They have driven him to desperation. And Mademoiselle Crane's love for him, it may have clouded her judgment, or worse. As night fell, Poirot stood by the library window, gazing out at the darkened gardens. The key, now nestled in his pocket, was a tangible link to the murderer's plan, but its significance was not yet clear. The passage, the cyanide, the note-all, were pieces of a puzzle that grew more intricate with each discovery. The clue of the key had illuminated a path, but it led into a maze of motives and deceptions. Hercule Poirot, his little gray cells. A light knew that the truth was within reach, waiting to be uncovered in the silent corridors of Ashburn Manor. Chapter 8. The poison sourced. The drawing room of Ashburn Manor, with its high ceilings and ornate plasterwork, seemed to close in under the weight of the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. The morning light, filtered through heavy damask curtains, cast a muted glow over the room, where Hercule Poirot sat in a velvet-upholstered chair, his small, precise figure a beacon of calm amidst the storm of suspicion. Captain Arthur Hastings stood by the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back, his brow furrowed, as he grappled with the mounting complexities of Eleanor Winthrop's murder. The air was thick with the scent of beeswax polish and the faint, lingering trace of yesterday's floral arrangements, now wilting in their vases like silent mourners. Poirot's gray eyes, sharp and unyielding, were fixed on a small notebook. In his lap, where he had meticulously recorded the details of the case, the spilled champagne, the bruised rose, the hidden key, the note signed with a V, and the bitter almond scent of cyanide. Each clue was a thread in a tapestry of deception, and Poirot was determined to unravel its pattern. The discovery of the key in the passage had confirmed his suspicion of a calculated plan, but the source of the poison remained a critical piece of the puzzle. Hastings, Poirot said, his voice measured, the cyanide, it is no common substance. It requires intent, preparation, access. We must trace its origin, for in doing so, we will find the hand that wielded it. Hastings turned from the fireplace, his expression troubled. Cyanide's a nasty business, Poirot. Not something you'd find lying about. The gardener's shed, perhaps. Mrs. Grimsby mentioned it's used for pest control. Precisement, Poirot replied, his mustache twitching with interest. But the shed, it is locked, and the gardener, Monsieur Dawson, is a man of long service. We must verify his account. And we must also consider other sources. A chemist, a photographer, even a medical man might have access. But first, we return to the champagne, for it is the most likely vehicle of the poison. Poirot summoned Dr. Langley, the local physician, who had confirmed the presence of cyanide in Eleanor's body. The doctor, a wiry man with a perpetually grave demeanor, entered the drawing room, his medical bag clutched in one hand. Mr. Poirot, he said, nodding, I've little to add to my report. The cyanide was administered orally, likely in a drink, given the absence of injection marks. Death was swift within minutes. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. Mercy, doctor. This champagne spilled in the bridal suite, could it have carried the poison? And how much cyanide would be needed for such a rapid effect? Doctor. Langley frowned, considering. A small dose, perhaps a few grains, would suffice if dissolved in liquid. Champagne would mask the taste, though cyanide has a faint bitter note. The spilled glass you mentioned, it's possible, but without testing the residue, I can't be certain. The police took samples, but results will take time. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging the information. And the source, doctor. Where might one obtain cyanide in this quiet corner of Kent? The doctor hesitated, his fingers tightening on his bag. It's not common, but not impossible. Gardeners use it, as you know, for pest control. Photographers, too, in developing solutions, though that's less common now. And in medical circles, well, it's rare, but some compounds contain cyanide in controlled forms. A determined person could acquire it with effort. Mercy, Poirot said, dismissing the doctor. With a nod, he turned to Hastings. The champagne, it is our link. Mademoiselle Crane delivered it, and the footman, James, poured it. We must question him again, for he may have seen something he did not realize was significant. They found James in the servants' hall, polishing silver with a nervous energy. The young footman, his face pale, stood at attention as Poirot approached. Monsieur James, Poirot began, his tone gentle but probing, you poured the champagne for Mademoiselle Eleanor. Oui. Tell me again, with precision, what occurred. James swallowed, his hands fidgeting. Yes, sir. Miss Lydia asked for a glass special for Miss Eleanor, said it was their tradition. I took a flute from the tray, poured it from the Krug bottle same as the others and handed it to her. She took it straight up to the bridal suite. I didn't see anyone tamper with it, I swear. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And this bottle, it was open already. Or did you open it yourself? It was open, sir, James said. We'd been serving from it all afternoon. It was on the table, near the ice bucket. Lots of folks were about, guests, staff, even Mr. Marshall, though he was drinking whiskey. Poirot's mustache twitched. Monsieur Marshall, near the refreshment table, you are certain? James nodded, then hesitated. Well, I think so, sir. It was busy, and I wasn't watching close. He was talking to one of the maids, I reckon, but I can't say for sure. Mercy, Monsieur James, Poirot said, dismissing the footman. He turned to Hastings, his voice low. The bottle, already open, accessible to many. The poison could have been added at any moment. But the glass was delivered by Mademoiselle Crane. We must confront her, for her story, it does not align perfectly. They found Lydia Crane in the conservatory, a glass-walled haven filled with ferns and orchids, where she sat staring at a potted lily, her face pale and drawn. Her gray dress seemed to blend with the shadows, and her auburn hair, usually so vibrant, hung limply around her shoulders. She started as Poirot approached, her green eyes wary. Mademoiselle Crane, Poirot said, his voice soft but unyielding. We must speak again. The champagne you delivered to Mademoiselle Eleanor. Is now clear that it may have carried the cyanide that killed her. You told me you poured it yourself. Yet the footman, James, says he poured it and gave it to you. Why this discrepancy? Lydia's hands flew to her face, her eyes wide with panic. I must have misspoken, Mr. Poirot. It was such a whirlwind. The reception, the guest's sigh, meant I took the glass from James, not that I poured it. I didn't think to clarify. I swear, I didn't tamper with it. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. And yet, mademoiselle, you were the last to see your friend alive, with this glass in her hand. You lied about pouring it, and now you claim forgetfulness. The little gray cells, they wonder what else do you conceal. Lydia's shoulders shook, and tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm not hiding anything. I loved Eleanor. I took her the champagne, yes, but I left her laughing, adjusting her veil. I didn't know, how could I know? She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Poirot watched her closely, noting the raw emotion, the trembling fingers. And this storeroom, mademoiselle, where she was found, you knew it from childhood. Did you also know of the cyanide kept in the gardener's shed? Lydia's head snapped up, her eyes blazing through tears. The shed. I haven't been near it in years. Yes, I knew the storeroom, but I had no reason to go there, no reason to hurt her. You must believe me. Poirot's expression softened, though his mind remained sharp. I believe only what the evidence tells me, mademoiselle. But your grief, It is genuine, I think. Go now, but do not leave the manor." As Lydia fled, her sobs echoing in the conservatory, Hastings turned to Poirot, his brow furrowed. "She's a wreck, Poirot. Do you think she's telling the truth, or is this all an act?" Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. "Her tears, they are real, but tears can flow from guilt as well as sorrow. The champagne. It is the key. If the cyanide was in the glass, it was placed there either in the ballroom or before Mademoiselle Crane took it upstairs. We must also consider the noted V points to Monsieur Marshall, but the cyanide, it could point elsewhere." They sought out Mr. Dawson, the head gardener, a weathered man with hands calloused from decades of toil. He confirmed the presence of cyanide in the shed, locked in a steel box, to which only he held the key. "Never had a problem with it, sir," he said, his voice gruff. "It's for the moles, you see, but I keep it secure. Last checked it a week ago, and nothing was missing." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And this key, Monsieur Dawson, where is it kept?" "On my chain, sir," Dawson said, producing a ring of keys from his pocket. "Never leave my sight." Poirot nodded, though his mind was already turning to other possibilities. A determined person could pick a lock, or bribe a servant, or find cyanide elsewhere. The poison's source was closer, but not yet clear. As they returned to the drawing room, Poirot's thoughts swirled. The champagne, the note, the key, the cyanide, all were pieces of a meticulously crafted crime. Lydia's lie about pouring the glass, Marshall's proximity to the refreshment table. Charles's debts, each suspect held a piece of the truth. The poisoned source was a clue that could unravel the mystery, and Hercule Poirot, his little gray cells alight, was determined to find it before the shadows of Ashbourne Manor closed in once more. Chapter 9. The hidden passage. The air in Ashbourne Manor had grown heavy, as if the very walls bore the burden of Eleanor Winthrop's murder. The late afternoon sun cast slanting rays through the mullioned windows, painting the corridors with patterns of light and shadow that seemed to mirror the complexity of the mystery unfolding within. Hercule Poirot, his small figure moving with deliberate precision, led Captain Arthur Hastings back to the east wing, where the storeroom and its secrets awaited further scrutiny. The discovery of the ornate key in the hidden passage had ignited Poirot's little gray cells, and now, armed with new questions about the cyanide's source and Lydia Crane's conflicting account, he was determined to explore the passage itself. The truth, he sensed, lay in its dusty confines, concealed like a spider in its web. Hastings, clutching the lantern, followed closely, his face etched with a mixture of anticipation and unease. "Poirot," he said, his voice echoing softly. "In the dim corridor, this passage business is positively eerie. A murderer sneaking through hidden tunnels, locking doors behind them midst, like something out of a Gothic novel. Do you really think it's the key to the whole affair?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Mon ami, the Gothic, it is romantic, but the truth, it is methodical. This passage, it is no mere plot device. It is the means by which the impossible was made possible. The murderer lured Mademoiselle Eleanor to the storeroom, administered the poison, and escaped unseen, locking the door with the key we found. But why this elaborate scheme? That is what we must uncover." They reached the storeroom, its heavy oak door still sealed by the police, but opened at Poirot's request. The room was as they had left it, the crates, the dust, the faint almond-like scent of cyanide lingering like a ghost. Eleanor's body had been removed, but the memory of her slumped form, pristine in her wedding gown, haunted the space. Poirot moved directly to the concealed panel at the back, its outline barely discernible in the woodwork. With a gentle press, it swung open, revealing the narrow, stone-walled passage beyond. The lantern's light cast flickering shadows as they stepped inside, the air thick with the musty scent of disuse. The passage was cramped, its ceiling low enough to force Hastings to stoop. But Poirot, with his diminutive stature, moved with ease. The floor was strewn with dust, disturbed in places by footprints Eleanor's delicate slippers, and a larger, less distinct set that suggested a careful tread. Poirot knelt, his magnifying glass hovering over the tracks, his eyes narrowing as he traced their path. "Observe, Hastings," he said, pointing to the larger prints. "These are not as clear as Mademoiselle Eleanor's. The murderer, he took care to obscure his steps, perhaps brushing the dust behind him. But here he indicated a faint smudge, a heel mark, broad, like that of a man's shoe. It is not conclusive, but it is suggestive." Hastings peered over his shoulder, his brow furrowed. Marshall's shoes, perhaps. He knew the passage from childhood, and that note with the V points straight to him. Poirot rose, brushing dust from his knees. "The note, it is a clue, but perhaps too obvious. Monsieur Marshall, he is clever, but would he be so careless? We must also consider Mademoiselle Crane, who knew this passage, and Monsieur Haverford, whose alibi, though strong, is not beyond question. Come, let us follow the trail." The passage wound through the manor's underbelly, its stone walls cold and damp, its silence broken only by the soft crunch of their footsteps. It curved behind the library, where the hidden bookcase door lay, and continued further, branching toward a disused servant's stair. Poirot paused at the junction, his lantern illuminating a small alcove where a rusty iron hook protruded from the wall. Caught on the hook was a single thread, dark gray, almost invisible in the dim light. "Voila," Poirot said, carefully plucking the thread with tweezers and holding it to the light. "A clue, small but significant. This thread, it is wool. Perhaps from a suit. Monsieur Marshall wore gray, did he not? But so, too, did many guests. We must compare it later." Hastings frowned, his impatience evident. "A thread, Poirot. It could belong to anyone. This passage hasn't been used in years. How do we know it's from the murderer?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet conviction. "The dust, mon ami. It tells us. The passage was used recently, within days, perhaps hours, of the murder. This thread, it is fresh, not brittle with age. It belongs to someone who passed through here, and that someone is our killer." They continued, emerging at the library's bookcase. Its latch wailed and silent. Poirot tested it, noting how easily it moved, a sign of recent maintenance. "This door," he said, "it was prepared. The murderer knew his route, planned his escape. But the key, why hide it in the passage, so close to the crime? It is a risk, unless he intended it to be found later, to shift blame." Hastings rubbed his chin, his mind grappling with the implications. So the murderer locks Eleanor in the storeroom, slips through the passage, hides the key, and reappears among the guests, all without being seen. "It's devilishly clever, Poirot, but who could pull it off?" Poirot's expression was enigmatic. "Someone with knowledge, with nerve, with motive. We have 3 suspects: Monsieur Haverford, whose debts may have driven him to desperation; Mademoiselle Crane, whose love for him may have twisted her loyalty; and Monsieur Marshall, whose past with Eleanor and presence at the wedding raise questions. Each knew the manor, each had opportunity." They returned to the storeroom, where Poirot conducted a final sweep, his magnifying glass lingering on the crates. He paused at the smudge of ash he had noted earlier, now suspecting it matched the tobacco scent of Marshall's cigarettes. Yet the evidence was circumstantial, and Poirot's mind cautioned against premature conclusions. He summoned Mrs. Grimsby, who arrived with a weary air, her hands clasped tightly before her. "Madame," Poirot said, "this passage, it was known to Mademoiselle Eleanor, Mademoiselle Crane, and Monsieur Marshall from their childhood. Were there others who played such games, who might know its secrets?" Mrs. Grimsby shook her head. "Not many, sir. The Winthrop children, Eleanor and her brother, who's abroad, now played with Lydia and Victor, and sometimes a few cousins. But the passages were a secret, even from most of the staff. I only knew because I caught them sneaking about once or twice. And Monsieur Haverford, Poirot pressed, did he ever explore the manor in this way? Not that I know, sir, she replied. He visited as a suitor, not as a child. But Eleanor might have shown him, I suppose. She was fond of the manor's quirks. Poirot thanked her, his mind turning to the cyanide. He sought out Mr. Dawson, the gardener, once more, questioning him about the shed's security. Dawson, his weathered face creased with worry, insisted the cyanide box was untouched, the lock intact. I checked it this morning, sir, he said. Not a grain missing. I'd stake my life on it. Poirot nodded, though his thoughts were elsewhere. The cyanide could have come from another source, a chemist, a dark room, a hidden cache. He resolved to investigate local suppliers, but first, he turned his attention to the note's handwriting, comparing it to Marshall's signature in the guest book. He found similarities in the bold strokes, yet a subtle difference in the flourish of the V gave him pause. Was it a deliberate imitation, or Marshall's own hand, altered to mislead? As they left the storeroom, Poirot paused in the corridor, his hands clasped behind his back. The passage, Hastings, it is the murderer's path, but it is also his. Mistake. The key, the thread, the ash, these are his footprints, left in haste or arrogance. We are close, mon ami, but we must tread carefully. The truth, it is a delicate thing, easily obscured by the shadows of this manor. Hastings, his lantern flickering, nodded grimly. It's a tangled web, Poirot. Marshall's looking guiltier by the minute. But Lydia's lie about the champagne, and Charles's debts, they're not innocent either. Poirot's eyes gleamed with determination. The web, it will unravel. The hidden passage has revealed its secrets. But the poison, the note, the motive, they remain. We must press forward, Hastings, for the truth is within our grasp, and Hercule Poirot will not let it slip away. Chapter 10. The motive unraveled. The grand drawing room of Ashbourne Manor, with its soaring ceilings and walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced Winthrops, seemed to hold its breath as Hercule Poirot prepared to confront the tangled web of motives surrounding Eleanor Winthrop's murder. The late morning light streamed through tall windows, illuminating motes of dust that danced like silent witnesses to the tragedy. The room was filled with an uneasy assembly. Charles Haverford, his handsome face drawn with grief. Lydia Crane, her auburn hair framing a visage pale with apprehension. And Victor Marshall, his sardonic smile a thin veneer over a guarded demeanor. Captain Arthur Hastings stood near the fireplace, his arms crossed, his eyes darting between the suspects as Poirot took his place at the center of the room, his small figure commanding attention with an air of quiet authority. Ladies and gentlemen, Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant. We are gathered to unravel the mystery of Mademoiselle Eleanor Winthrop's death, a crime most foul, committed in the heart of her joyous day. The little gray cells, they have been at work, and now, the threads of this puzzle begin to form a pattern. It is a pattern of passion, of jealousy, of secrets long buried. He paused, his gray eye sweeping the room, noting the tension in Charles's clenched fists, the nervous twist of Lydia's handkerchief, and the faint tightening of Marshall's jaw. Let us begin with the facts, Poirot continued. Mademoiselle Eleanor was poisoned with cyanide, likely in the champagne delivered to her in the bridal suite. She was found in a locked storeroom, accessible only by a hidden passage known to a few. A note, signed with a V, urged her to meet in that storeroom, and a key, hidden in the passage, locked the door behind her. These are not accidents. Mise Amos, but the work of a mind most calculating. Charles shifted in his seat, his voice hoarse. Mr. Poirot, please tell us who did this. I can't bear not knowing. Poirot raised a hand, his gesture calm but commanding. Patience, Monsieur Haverford. The truth, it reveals itself in its own time. Let us first consider the champagne. Mademoiselle Crane, you delivered the glass to your friend, yet you claimed at first to have poured it yourself, a lie, as the footman, James, poured it from an open bottle in the ballroom. Why this falsehood? Lydia's eyes widened, her hands trembling as she clutched her handkerchief. It was a mistake, Mr. Poirot. I was flustered. The day was chaotic. I meant only that I took the glass to her. I swear, I didn't tamper with it. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. And yet, mademoiselle, your actions are central. The champagne, it is the vehicle of the poison, and you were the last to see Mademoiselle Eleanor alive. But there is more. I have observed your glances at Monsieur Haverford, the pain in your eyes when he spoke of his bride. You loved him, did you not? A love unreturned, for his heart belonged to Eleanor. Lydia gasped, her face flushing crimson. Yes, I loved him, she admitted, her voice breaking. I've loved Charles for years, but he chose Eleanor. I didn't resent her for it. She was my friend, my sister in all but name. I wanted her happiness, even if it broke my heart. Poirot nodded, his expression softening but his mind sharp. Your grief, it is genuine, I believe. Your love for Monsieur Haverford, it drove you to despair, but not to murder. The little gray cells, they see a heart too loyal for such a crime. But you knew the storeroom, the passage. Did you share this knowledge with another? Lydia shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. No, I told no one. The storeroom was our childhood secret, Eleanor, Victor, and I hadn't thought of it in years, until she was found there. Poirot turned to Charles, his eyes narrowing. Monsieur Haverford, your grief too is evident, but there are whispers of debts, a financial strain. A marriage to Mademoiselle Eleanor, it would have eased such burdens, Nan. And yet, her death leaves you with nothing but suspicion. Did you know of the storeroom, perhaps from your bride's tales? Charles's face darkened, his voice rising. I've told you, Mr. Poirot, I loved Eleanor. My debts are real, but they're manageable. Position in London, a small inheritance from my uncle. I had no reason to harm her. As for the storeroom, she mentioned it once, in passing, but I've never seen it. I was in the ballroom, surrounded by guests, when she vanished. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his scrutiny. Your alibi, it is strong, corroborated by many. Yet the heart, it can conceal motives even from oneself. Let us turn to another. He faced Victor Marshall, whose cigarette had burned to a stub, his smile now a thin, brittle line. Monsieur Marshall, you are the mysterious guest, arriving uninvited, your presence unsettling to the bride. The note in her hand, signed with a V, points to you. Your handwriting, it matches closely, and your childhood knowledge of the storeroom and its passage places you at the scene. But there is more. A rejection, years ago, when Mademoiselle Eleanor spurned your proposal, a wound to the heart. It festers, does it not? Marshall's laugh was sharp, almost defiant. You're reaching, Poirot. Yes, I proposed to Eleanor when we were young, foolish, impulsive. She turned me down, and I moved on. I came to the wedding on a whim, to see the family, nothing more. That note. Someone's trying to frame me. I didn't write it, and I didn't go near any champagne. Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet intensity. And yet, monsieur, you were seen near the refreshment table, speaking to a maid. The ash in the storeroom, it smells of your cigarettes. The thread in the passage, it matches your gray suit. And the key, hidden where only one familiar with the manor's secrets would place it. You knew of the cyanide in the gardener's shed, from your boyhood explorations. Marshall's smile vanished, his hands clenching. You're building a house of cards, Poirot. I knew the manor, sure, but so did Lydia. And Charles, he had more reason to want Eleanor gone, with his debts piling up. Why point the finger at me? Poirot stepped closer, his voice low and commanding. Because, monsieur, the evidence, it converges on you. The note, it lured Mademoiselle Eleanor to the storeroom, where you waited. The champagne, perhaps tampered with in the ballroom, was delivered by an unsuspecting Mademoiselle Crane. You used the passage to escape, locking the door with the key you hid, believing it would not be found so soon. But you underestimated Hercule Poirot. Marshall rose, his face pale, his eyes darting to the door. This is nonsense. You have no proof, only guesses. Poirot produced the note from his pocket, holding it aloft. This note, monsieur, it is your hand, confirmed by the guest book. And the cyanide, did you not once work in a photographic studio where such chemicals are used? The little gray cells, they do not forget. Charles stood, his voice shaking. Is it true, Marshall? Did you kill her? Lydia sobbed, her hands covering her face. Victor, how could you? Marshall took a step back, his composure cracking. I didn't. I swear. Poirot's voice cut through the tension. The motive, monsieur, it is jealousy, a wound from years past. You could not bear to see Mademoiselle Eleanor happy with another, not after she rejected you. The storeroom, it was your stage, the passage your escape, the note your lure. But you left too many traces: the key, the ash, the thread. Hastings, his eyes wide, whispered, Good Lord, Poirot, you've got him. Poirot's gaze remained fixed on Marshall. The truth, monsieur, it is clear. Confess, and spare us further deception. Marshall's shoulders slumped, but he shook his head, his voice hoarse. You're wrong, Poirot. I didn't do it. Poirot nodded, as if expecting. The denial. We shall see, monsieur. The evidence, it will speak for itself. As the room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words hung heavy. The motive, unraveled at last, pointed to a crime of passion, but the final proof was still to come. The little gray cells were not yet satisfied, and Hercule Poirot knew the next step would seal the cassure, unravel it further. Chapter 11. The final proof. The tension in Ashbourne Manor's drawing-room was palpable, as if the very air held its breath in anticipation of the truth about Eleanor Winthrop's murder. The late afternoon light, now fading into a soft amber glow, filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Hercule Poirot stood at the room's center, his small, precise figure radiating an authority that silenced the murmurs of the assembled suspects. Charles Haverford, his face a mask of anguish. Lydia Crane, her eyes red-rimmed and wary. And Victor Marshall, whose sardonic demeanor had given way to a taut, defensive posture. Captain Arthur Hastings leaned against the mantelpiece, his expression a mixture of awe and apprehension as he watched. Poirot prepared to lay bare the final pieces of the puzzle. Ladies and gentlemen, Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, cutting through the heavy silence. We have unraveled much of the mystery surrounding Mademoiselle Eleanor's death, but the final proof, it is now within our grasp. The little gray cells, they have worked tirelessly, and the evidence, it speaks with a clarity that cannot be ignored. Let us review the tapestry of this crime, thread by thread, to see the picture it reveals. He paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his gray eyes sweeping the room. Mademoiselle Eleanor was poisoned with cyanide, delivered, I believe, in the champagne brought to her by Mademoiselle Crane. She was lured to the storeroom by a note signed with a V. Found dead in a locked room, accessible only by a hidden passage. The key to that lock, discovered in the passage, was hidden with care, and a thread, a smudge of ash, and the note itself point to a single figure. But let us proceed with method. Poirot turned to Lydia, his gaze gentle but probing. Mademoiselle Crane, your love for Monsieur Haverford, it is a truth you have confessed. Your lie about pouring the champagne, it was born of confusion, perhaps, or fear. But your knowledge of the storeroom and its passage, it places you near the heart of this crime. Did you, in a moment of weakness, aid another?" Lydia shook her head vehemently, her voice trembling. "No, Mr. Poirot, I loved Eleanor, I swear. I took her the champagne, yes, but I didn't know it was poisoned. I knew the storeroom from childhood, but I hadn't been there in years. I told no one of the passage." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Your heart, it speaks truly, I think. Your role, it was unwitting, a pawn in a greater scheme. Let us turn to Monsieur Haverford." Charles, his hands clenched, leaned forward. "I've told you everything, Poirot. I was in the ballroom, surrounded by guests. I loved Eleanor, her death has destroyed me. I knew nothing of the storeroom, or its passage until you mentioned it." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Your alibi, monsieur, it is strong, corroborated by many. Your debts, they are a shadow, but not proof of murder. Yet the little grey cells, they wondered at Mademoiselle Eleanor share secrets with you, perhaps of the manor's hidden ways." Charles shook his head, his eyes desperate. "She mentioned the storeroom once, as a childhood memory, but I never saw it. I had no reason to harm her." Poirot's gaze shifted to Victor Marshall, whose cigarette had long since burned out, his hands now fidgeting in his lap. "Monsieur Marshall, you are the enigma. Your uninvited presence, your past with Mademoiselle Eleanor, the note with your initial all point to you. The handwriting, it matches your bold scrawl in the guest book. The thread in the passage, it is grey, like your suit. The ash in the storeroom, it smells of your cigarettes. And the cyanide, did you not once work in a photographic studio, where such poisons are known?" Marshall's face paled, his voice sharp with defiance. "You're weaving a fairy tale, Poirot. Yes, I knew Eleanor years ago, and yes, I proposed once, but that was ancient history. I came to the wedding on a whim, nothing more. The note. Someone's framing me. I never went near the storeroom, and I haven't touched cyanide in my life." Poirot produced the note from his pocket, holding it aloft. "This note, monsieur, it is your hand, confirmed by experts this morning." And this he drew a small stoppered vial from his coat. Its contents glinting ominously, was found in your room, hidden in a cigarette case. Cyanide, monsieur, enough to kill. You knew the passage, you knew the storeroom, and you knew Mademoiselle Eleanor's heart-to-heart that rejected you." Marshall leapt to his feet, his eyes wild. "That's a lie. I never had cyanide. Someone planted that vial." Poirot's voice was calm but unrelenting. "The vial, it bears your fingerprints, monsieur. The maid who cleaned your room saw you hide something in the case, though she thought it was merely tobacco. You lured Mademoiselle Eleanor to the storeroom with the note, poisoned her champagne in the ballroom. Perhaps, when you spoke to the maid near the refreshment table, Len used the passage to escape, locking the door with the key you hid. Your motive, it was jealousy, a wound from years past, festering until it drove you to murder." Charles surged forward, his voice breaking. "You monster, Marshall! You killed her because she wouldn't have you." Lydia sobbed, her hands covering her face. "Victor, how could you?" Marshall backed toward the door, his face ashen. "You're wrong, Poirot. I didn't do it." He lunged for the exit, but Hastings, quick on his feet, blocked his path, restraining him with a firm grip. Poirot raised a hand, his voice commanding. "Monsieur Marshall, the evidence, it is overwhelming. The note, the vial, the passage, the key, they all point to you. Confess, and spare us further deception." Marshall struggled against Hastings, his voice hoarse. "I'm innocent. Someone's set me up, someone who knew about the passage, the cyanide." Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet conviction. "The little grey cells, they do not err. The police, they are on their way. And the truth, it will be confirmed. You underestimated Hercule Poirot, monsieur, and that was your fatal mistake. As Hastings held Marshall, the sound of heavy boots echoed in the corridor, signaling the arrival of the local constabulary. Inspector Reed, a doorman with a bristling mustache, entered, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. "Mr. Poirot," he said, "you've got your man, I hear." Poirot nodded, handing over the note and vial. "Inspector, this is Monsieur Victor Marshall, the murderer of Mademoiselle Eleanor Winthrop. The evidence, it is conclusive. The note in his hand, the cyanide in his possession, the key hidden in the passage he knew from childhood. His motive, it was a spurned love, a rejection that festered into vengeance." Marshall's shoulders slumped, his defiance crumbling as the constables took him into custody. "I didn't do it," he muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Drowned by the weight of the evidence, as Marshall was led away, Charles collapsed into a chair, his face buried in his hands. "Eleanor, my Eleanor," he whispered, his voice thick with grief. Lydia, still sobbing, reached out to him, then drew back, her own pain too raw to bridge the gap. "I'm so sorry, Charles," she murmured, her words barely audible. Poirot turned to Hastings, his expression somber. "The final proof, mon ami, it is complete. The note, the vial, the key. They tell a story of jealousy and betrayal. Monsieur Marshall, he could not let Mademoiselle Eleanor live happily with another, not after she rejected him." Hastings shook his head, his voice low. "It's monstrous, Poirot, to plan it so coldly, to use the passage, the poison. You saw it all, didn't you?" Poirot's lips curved in a faint, melancholic smile. "The little gray cells, Hastings, they see what others overlook? But the victory, it is bittersweet, for it cannot bring back Mademoiselle Eleanor." As the room emptied, the constables escorting Marshall to the waiting police van, Poirot stood alone by the window, gazing out at the darkening gardens. The final proof had been secured, but the cost of the truth weighed heavily. The case of the vanished bride was nearing its close, yet one final act remained to lay the tragedy to rest. Chapter 12. The resolution. The twilight over Ashburn Manor draped the estate in a somber veil, its ancient walls softened by the fading light of a summer's evening. The once vibrant wedding decorations, now removed, left the halls stark and silent, as if the manor itself mourned the loss of Eleanor Winthrop. The drawing room, where Hercule Poirot had unveiled the murderer only hours before, was empty save for the lingering scent of wax polish and the faint echo of recent turmoil. Outside, the gardens stretched into shadow, their roses drooping under the weight of dew. Poirot, his small figure impeccable in a charcoal suit, walked the gravel path beside Captain Arthur Hastings, his steps measured, his expression one of quiet reflection. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low against the evening's hush. "The case of the vanished bride, it is closed. The truth, it has been brought to light, but it leaves a wound, does it not? The heart, it suffers even when justice is served." Hastings, his hands thrust into his pockets, nodded gravely. "It's a grim business, Poirot. Poor Eleanor, killed on her wedding day, and for what? A spurned love from years ago. You saw it, all, the note, the key, the cyanide. Brilliant work, as always, but it doesn't bring her back." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint gesture of acknowledgement. "The brilliance, Hastings, it is merely method, the order of the little gray cells. But you are right, the victory. It is hollow when a life is lost. Let us review, one final time, the path that led us here, to ensure no shadow of doubt remains." They paused by a stone bench overlooking the rose garden, its blooms now cloaked in dusk. Poirot's eyes, sharp and gray, seemed to pierce the gathering darkness as he spoke. "Mademoiselle Eleanor was poisoned with cyanide, administered in the champagne delivered by Mademoiselle Crane. The note, signed with a V, lured her to the storeroom. where she died in a locked room, accessible only by a hidden passage. The key, found in that passage, was the murderer's tool to create an illusion of impossibility. The thread, the ash, the vial of cyanide all pointed to Monsieur Victor Marshall. Hastings sat on the bench, his brow furrowed. And Marshall's motive: jealousy over a rejection years ago. It's almost too cruel to believe, Poirot. To hold a grudge that long, to plan such a cold-blooded act. Oui, Poirot agreed, his voice soft but firm. The heart, when wounded, can nurture a poison as deadly as cyanide. Monsieur Marshall, he could not bear to see Mademoiselle Eleanor wed to another. His proposal, rejected in youth, festered into a hatred that found its outlet in this crime. He knew the manor's secrets, the storeroom, the passage from his childhood. He used the note to draw her there, poisoned the champagne in the ballroom's chaos, and escaped through the passage, locking the door behind him. Hastings shook his head, his voice tinged with awe. The way you pieced it together, Poirot, the handwriting in the guest book, the vial in his cigarette case, the thread from his suit. It was like watching a puzzle snap into place. But what about Lydia? Her lie about the champagne, her love for Charles, could she have been involved? Poirot's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the last sliver of sunlight vanished. Mademoiselle Crane, she is a tragic figure. Her love for Monsieur Haverford, it was unrequited, and her lie, it was born of fear, not guilt. She delivered the champagne, unaware it was poisoned, a pawn in Marshall's scheme. Her knowledge of the storeroom, it was incidental, a memory of childhood games. No, Hastings, her heart, it broke for Eleanor, not against her. And Charles, Hastings pressed. His debts, his alibi, were we too quick to dismiss him? Poirot's lips curved in a melancholic smile. Monsieur Haverford, his grief is genuine, his alibi corroborated by many. His debts, they are a burden, but not a motive for murder. Mademoiselle Eleanor's fortune, it was modest, not worth the risk of such a crime. No, the evidence, it all converges on Monsieur Marshall: the note, the vial, the fingerprints, the ash. He alone had the motive, the means, and the opportunity. They walked on, the gravel crunching underfoot, the manor looming behind them like a silent sentinel. The police had taken Victor Marshall away, his protests of innocence drowned by the weight of evidence. Charles Haverford remained in the manor, cloistered in his grief, while Lydia Crane, her heart laid bare, had retreated to her room, unable to face the wreckage of her unreturned love. The guests had dispersed, the staff moved quietly, and the manor seemed to settle into a mournful peace. Poirot stopped at the edge of the garden, his eyes fixed on a single white rose, its petals bruised like the one found in the bridal suite. This rose, he said softly, it was a symbol of Mademoiselle Eleanor's joy, now a reminder of her loss. The murderer, he sought to extinguish that joy, but he could not extinguish the truth. The little gray cells, they have prevailed. Hastings clapped a hand on Poirot's shoulder, his voice warm. You're a marvel, Poirot. The way you saw through it, all the passage, the key, the note. You brought justice to Eleanor, even if it came too late. Poirot's expression was somber. Justice, mon ami, it is a cold comfort. Love, it is a force as dangerous as any poison, driving men to acts of madness. Monsieur Marshall, his heart was consumed by it, and in his vengeance, he destroyed not only Eleanor, but himself. They turned back toward the manor, its windows now dark, the last echoes of the wedding faded into memory. The case of the vanished bride was closed, its secrets laid bare by Poirot's relentless pursuit of truth. As they reached the entrance, the night closed in, stars pricking the sky above. Poirot paused, his hand on the door, his voice barely a whisper. The truth, Hastings, it is a light in the darkness, but the darkness, it remains, always waiting. Come, let us leave this place to its sorrow. With that, Hercule Poirot stepped into the manor, the resolution complete, the mystery solved. but the ache of loss, lingering like the scent of roses in the evening air.